Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the evening service at Gateway Baptist Church in Cleveland, Georgia. I'm David Coyle. Hopefully any moment we'll be joined by the pastor, because I've only got one presentation to give tonight. It's short, but we could fix that. I brought a visual aid with me, and it may aid some of your vision, and it may not, but we'll see. I want to point out a couple of things using it, and you will notice right off that it doesn't look a whole lot like the Ark at the Ark Encounter, and that's because I started making mine before they released enough pictures for me to steal ideas from. But I found at least 6 or 7 different sets of ideas for the Ark, and I took something from all of them. Started out with the basic shape that Henry Morris and Dr. John Whitcomb came up with back in the mid-60s, and that was the square barge shape. And do you know that when Ken Ham his people started to build that ark, there were those who got offended because it didn't look like Henry Morris's shoebox-shaped ark. And Morris and then later on Whitcomb had both made statements that it was never intended to be the poster picture for the ark, but it was simply the easiest shape to produce in order to list all of the 3 sizes that the ark was supposed to be: length, width, and height. And so that was the easiest shape. And others have done a lot of research. Ken Ham's people spent, I forget how many years. He had an engineer who builds ships or works in a company that builds ships and other things. And they went to the task of trying to figure out what the ark might have looked like at the dimensions given in the Bible, using as many ancient ideas as they could discover. And so they put those together, including pegging. Now, I didn't use any pegs to put that together, and I think there are only 3 nails in it. And that was because the glue didn't dry fast enough, and I set a couple of nails in there. He didn't use any glue. I used about 6 bottles of Elmer's and a bottle of wood glue and some clear varnish. And I didn't have any pitch, so I had to use the varnish. And a full can of red oak stain. So that's what I used. Mine probably looks nothing like the original ark, but then neither does his. But they both have one thing in common. They were created in order to give an idea. As they said in my sister's generation, an inkling of what it looked like. And so we have some basic ideas here. I put some plexiglass on it. I got a piece here on the top and the back. I've got a piece down here that opens up the whole side. The side, my top raises up. This isn't fixed down yet. I haven't. I'm going to put 3 hinges on this so I can fold it back and then lift this. And that side comes down so you can see some of the animals that might have been in it, some of the layout that might have been in the ark, and some of the storages as well as the animals that were in there. And yes, I have dinosaurs in here too. And it wasn't easy finding little itty bitty dinosaurs. I found them. And so I got those in there too. My people and animals, and I guess the ark itself, are basically to the scale of 1 to 72. Because that's the size people I got. I've got 8 people in there if you can find them. And but anyway, and then of course his top knot is the Bible says that he was to include a window. That's the window. Now a window by definition can be anything like that great big plate glass window in the front door, or it could be a big window with a lot of panes in it, or sections to it. So this whole construction on the top constitutes a window. And then I also have a door right there. Does not open. And is it seaworthy? No, it's not even bathtub worthy. I've got so much water-based glue in it that it would fall completely apart in a couple of hours. But that's my visual aid. Now, I hope all of you will come up here and kind of give it a good look over and keep all your comments. If they're negative, we'll give them to Junior. He can take it better than I can. Anything positive I will gladly receive. But just remember, I'm not a woodworker. And by training, I'm a welder. And so I think it turned out fairly decent. I never say good, because there's always something that will contradict you if you go that far. Now, we made it on these, oh, by the way, you have the ark with you? Anybody who doesn't? Who considers themselves an adult? Okay, yes, Ms. Donna. You don't. I don't have anybody I can go with. I have a volunteer. Remember back when we were dealing with the creation account, when God divided the firmament below from the firmament above, He allowed the firmament down here around the earth, that was turned into the oceans. Dry land would have come up out of the oceans and formed there. He would have dropped the basins to create the seas. And then there was an expanse of water that was taken up. And the Bible seems to indicate that it was in the upper atmosphere. It was part of what created our atmosphere. The upper atmosphere then probably would have had a, call it a crown, a corona, of water, water vapor, ice crystals, dry ice, whatever. And that would have regulated the temperature on Earth, keeping yet a tropical kind of climate until the time when that vapor canopy would have been removed. We call that the canopy period. It is not hard fact, but the evidence that we have from Scripture seems to indicate that that is reasonable, and secular scientists used to believe that too. Many don't. Even some Christian scientists, and I don't mean that as the splitter group that is a cult, but Christians who are scientists, some of those are now starting to abandon it for a different model. But until they can show me something different, I like the canon. Went on 5,000 years ago. They also went on, in their view, millions of years ago. Nothing has changed. Remember over in 1 Peter, when the scoffers come and say, nothing has changed. Where is the results of your promise? Nothing has changed from the beginning. It's all been the same. It hasn't all been the same. There have been other forces in effect that control our atmosphere, that control our climate, that control our planet, that control the intensity of the sun, that control the appearance of the moon in relation to the earth. The moon, we know, the pull of the earth against the pull of the moon creates the tidal changes that take place. So there was something fantastically different that took place at that time. And I believe that's when it was dissolved into rain, and it rained for 4 no more impossible than saying, let there be light. And there was. All right. It is the very first biblical mention of rain. And then that's another one of the keys that we use in believing that there was no rain before this time. I don't think Noah told them that the rain was coming. I think he told them that judgment was coming. I think he told them that there would be a universal flood and they couldn't reason it out. I mean, they were at the apex of religion and science and philosophy and understanding and technology, and if they couldn't reason it out, it wasn't reasonable. So they, I'm sure, laughed and scoffed. The Bible doesn't say they did, but we know human nature, and so I believe they did laugh and scoff at Noah. This man with his head in the clouds, believing in a God he couldn't see or prove, until the rain fell. When the rain fell, I'm sure they scratched their heads in serious consternation. But they still weren't ready to believe. And by that time, it was too late to believe. And they had made it a way of life to disassociate themselves away from the knowledge of God. And so they hung to that. It'll be that way again in the future when God will send them strong delusion. That is, God will allow them to continue to believe what they believed in the first place. And the more he demonstrates his power and his presence, the more his word is preached, the more people who testify and are witnesses or witness to will continue to disbelieve. It will only be a remnant in the tribulation that believes. It was only a remnant in Noah's day that believed. It's only a remnant in our day that believed. It was a remnant in Jesus' days when he walked on the earth that believed. It's never been, with one exception, it has never been a universal concept to worship and to adore and to believe in and follow God. And that only lasted a few days. And that was with Adam and Eve. They were both believers. So all mankind believed. As the generations began to progress, other ideas and other thoughts inspired by the one that led our first parents to sin, Satan, as the generations began to pile up, then those theories and ideas and stubbornness, obstinance, began to pile up and get thicker and thicker and thicker and more and more and more disbelieved than believed.
Satan is a very effective witness. And I don't mean that in a positive way. But it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. At the end of the 40th day, the ark began to lift up from the earth and float. Now, we'll hear that from just about everybody, and the scoffers say, well, I don't believe that 40 days worth of rain and 40 nights worth of rain would cause a worldwide flood and cataclysm to create the evidences that you claim are there as Christians. And it certainly will not have risen to over the peaks of the highest mountains. Now remember, we're talking about the peaks of the highest mountains at that time. The mountains were smaller. The oceans weren't as deep. They weren't probably as vast as what we have now. You ask, what happened to all the flood water? Well, it's still there. We call it the Atlantic, the Pacific, the Mediterranean. Our seas are about 200 feet deeper than the original shorelines that they have found, by the way. All the navies of the world are very well acquainted with that fact. The submariners use them as focal points, as guide points to traverse the oceans of the world. I don't know if Brother David knew that or not. Being a submariner, he probably did. Submariner. But the majority of the flood, the majority of the devastation, the majority of what took place did not come from 40 days and 40 nights of rain. Because simultaneous with that, and it may even have started first, was the fact that God, again, broke up the fountains of the deep. He erupted the ocean floors. The magma came up and spewed up through the oceans into the air, and we start forming volcanoes. And those volcanoes remained active for at least 150 days. And the warm water then that was created from volcano after volcano after volcano after volcano after volcano, all the way around the world, all at the same time, period. Not necessarily all at the exact same time, but at the same time, period. Okay? And that warmed the oceans significantly. And the water began to evaporate. As it evaporated, it joined the canopy of rain that was already coming and produced more rain. And more and more and more. But it was those volcanoes and earthquakes and seismic activity under the ocean and on the earth that broke it up. I made this statement before, and I'm going to stick by it. I believe that there was so much volcanic activity, so much seismic activity going on for that first period of 150 days and well beyond the second period of 150 days. In fact, most Christian scientists will tell you that it's still going on with the volcanoes that are erupting around the world today and the earthquakes that are seen. It is a direct result from the activity that God put into motion when He sent flood upon the earth. When will it end? When Jesus comes. He's got more plans for that activity during the tribulation. And there will be earthquakes and volcanic seismic activity, more than there ever has been before. Jesus covered that in Matthew 24. More than there ever has been before. There were also, because of all of that activity, strong winds were produced by the ocean waves, which turned into hurricanes and tsunamis and cyclones and all of those things. Mass erosion was taking place. The sea bottoms were washing up onto the land and over, erasing every sign of civilization and every vestige of vegetation that was there into the oceans and piling up silt as it went, wave after wave after wave after wave. And then finally, toward the end of all of it, the last waves then would have washed over the fresh mud and washed out great gullies and ditches. Let me just tell you, it wasn't the Colorado River that cut the Grand Canyon. And it didn't take millions of years. It may have taken a month. That's biblical science. And all of that is going on at the same time. And there are, in the breaking up of the seafloors in various places, tectonic plates begin to shift. Now, they didn't shift over thousands of years as the secularists tell us, because there is no mechanism to push them. There has to be something colossal that will push those plates. We call that the Noahic flood. When God broke up the fountains of the deep, and he caused those plates to shift, and they crashed into the continents. And where it crashed in, it piled up. When then under the continents, forced the continents up. It's called uplift. They say, and they have support for this, and I can give you a little of it, but they can give you a lot of it. The people who deal with this kind of thing day and night, day after day, they will tell you that the very first mountain range that was established on North America was the Appalachians, the Alleghenies, that they pushed up first. In fact, by the way, as it pushed on across the continent and it slammed in from the Pacific side, we end up with the Rockies and the Sierra Madres and all those. And did you know, and they said it traveled from east to west or southeast to northwest, and the ridges of limestone, they found a ridge of limestone that runs all the way from up around Wales, across the ocean, across the east coast, kind of veers off a little bit, and then travels off in that direction. And it's over 1,000 miles long, one single deposit from a single wave as it moved across the earth. Okay? One single wave. Steve Austin from the Institute of Creation Research was looking in the Grand Canyon because he had found a big, it's kind of like a squid, but it has a shell that comes down to a point, kind of cone-shaped. They're called nautiloids. And he found some of those in the Grand Canyon, so he decided to follow the shelf. Well, the nautiloids were deposited, and it took him several years. He said he followed those same nautiloids from the Grand Canyon Colorado, in Nevada, all the way over. He says that it runs further. He didn't have the money or the time to keep looking, but over to California. That is one ridge of nautiloids all buried at the same time, going in the same direction. How much time did I?
You're way over.
Oh, okay. You said nothing?
I did.
Okay. But we'll have to cut it with the nautiloids and come back to it. But I just wanted you to know those facts. God adjusted the original manifest of those who were beyond the ark. When the ark sailed, it had the clean animals as well as the regular animals. Instead of a pair of each, there were 7 pairs. Now, I've read some commentators that say 7 animals and others say 7 pairs. But I'm going to keep with the consistency of the first command and say there were 7 pairs. Because clean animals breed clean animals, and that was going to be necessary for thousands of years for worship, the worship of Jehovah, clear on up to the time of Christ, including the time of Christ. I don't know exactly when they can record when the sacrificial systems ended, but it was after Jesus walked on the earth. And so it was necessary to have those. I also have included in here a little Noah and a little altar where he is sacrificing the lamb. And I don't know if did he sacrifice before he went on the ark or while he was on the ark, but he sacrificed to God somewhere. I believe before he got off, because that's the first thing he did when he got off, was to honor God, who not only judged sin, but brought his family safely through the trial. Notice he didn't make them escape the trial. He saw them safely through. 1 Corinthians 10:13.